Do you know that genealogy is now the second most popular hobby after gardening? Ancestry websites are the craze. 2017 was the year DNA testing blew up. Many are making happy discoveries, but some families are blowing up as a result of their findings. This wasn't the first earthquake in Darlene Marten's life journey. It's a joy to have her here from Leamington, Ontario, the tomato capital of Canada.
Yes, absolutely.
Learn something every day. Darlene, it was a professor's challenge. You were in a course on family violence. And he said you need to do some work.
Basically what he said was you cannot complete this course unless you deal with your own childhood issues. If you have issues in your childhood, deal with those first before you can help people. And as a consequence, I knew that I had to deal with that little girl inside of me who had been sexually abused by her father before I could move ahead and finish the work I needed to do in my education.
Wow. It wasn't immediately clear, and I'm sure we have many people watching who'll identify with just flashbacks, impressions that took you on that part of the journey.
Absolutely. I was 38 years old at the time when I think enjoying my own children and realizing how different their lives were from what mine had been when I was 15, and just falling into a very deep depression, realizing that I needed to address those issues and those pains from my childhood.
You had a terrible mantra that just played over and over in your mind. What was the lie that you had come to believe?
As far back as I could remember, being 6 years old, hiding under our family front porch, family home front porch, it was that nobody loves me, everybody hates me.
Now, full disclosure, the suicidal thoughts and depression that really began to take over. You were involved in the occult. You would have seances with your friends, and you did open a door to the father of lies in a very real way.
Absolutely. When I was 15, I used to invite my friends over. We would have seances. We would fool around with Ouija boards. I think at the time we thought it was just pretty innocent stuff.
Party games.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think later, as this depression worsened and I started to have thoughts about suicide, those two things began to get tied together.
The encouraging thing is that very early you had an encounter with Jesus.
Absolutely. 8 years of age. My parents didn't go to church, but my mom sent us to Sunday school, and it was there that I heard my Sunday school teacher tell me how much Jesus Christ loved me, enough to die for me, forgive me for my sins. And I remember going home that night and just asking him into my heart and asking him to make me as white as snow.
Oh, how beautiful. It's through many dark things, and we're just opening this up. He was there. You could go back and see. I have to refer to this. I know the page, 217.
Okay.
Truly, evidences. I mean, even though the porch where you hid, there were flowers growing there in that place of darkness where you were running away from everything, where they shouldn't grow. They need sunlight, right?
Yep, the lily of the valley. Being able to see this plant growing and leaning over and smelling the beautiful fragrance from that flower.
So many evidences that in a very troubled home. Tell us about what happened before you were born.
Before I was born, my father actually fled the country with another woman, and rather than just own up to my mom to say, I've had an affair, he feigned his own suicide, left a suicide note, and headed off to the United States with this other woman.
Drove a bus to the Detroit River. But what person empties their bank account and the bus money if they're going to take their life?
Absolutely.
It didn't work too well. 4 months later, the police found him in Florida. Your mom accepted him back.
She did. She forgave him for that.
Did he leave the pregnant woman down in Florida, or what happened there?
As far as we know, she came back to Canada with the child. To this day, we really don't know who the woman or the child was. We have our inklings, but really don't have any substantiated facts to go along with that.
Dark mysteries. When your dad died, you read a victim impact statement over his grave, expressing to the man who had sexually abused you, your father, what it had meant in your life. How meaningful was that, Darlene?
That was incredibly meaningful because it gave me that place to be able to get rid of those last bits of anger, that intense emotion that was inside of me, to be able to really put on him that what he did to me was wrong and that I wanted nothing more to do with that.
Well, we have to find out how you climbed out of this darkness, and it's not the end of very shocking things. 30 years after Darlene's parents died, another shocking truth about your history and your identity. Wait for it. We'll be right back. Darlene Martens is a loving mother of 3. She's been happily married to her husband Jake for over 40 years. They have 6 grandchildren. Darlene has a Master of Social Work degree from the University of Windsor, and she's helping hurting people as a clinical social worker and therapist. She's also a Stephen minister, active in her church. All of this was made possible because of amazing grace, abounding love. Darlene, in your memoir of freedom from depression, lies, and abuse, you write, "For years, whenever I felt low, I reached out my hand and asked, 'Do you love me, Jesus?'" He walked you through layers of depression and pain, and at 57, you found out who you really are.
Absolutely. About 6 months after my father passed away, I was told that the lady who raised me was not my biological mother.
Oh, it's like, what more? What more could a life handle?
Well, I went on a journey to try and sort that out. Of course, there's too many layers to explain today. But at the end of that journey, I discovered a brother. He and I shared the same mother. I discovered that my biological mother was really who I thought to be my aunt. And the reason that she couldn't have raised me was because she'd been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, really struggled throughout her adult years. And so I was raised by my aunt and my biological father.
And for periods of time in and out, David, the brother you didn't know you had, half-brother, was in your home.
Yes, they would come and visit when my mother Victoria would go off the rails.
Your birth mother,
my
Victoria.
birth mother, yep. When she would go off the rails with her mental health, David would often stay with us. Sometimes just for a couple of days, but sometimes for months at a time.
To read about this, I mean, it should be a miniseries or a movie. Because there's little mysterious things. There's a photo here. There's a comment here. The mother who raised you said, "I can't save any more of Victoria's children." Little things that just started to add up, first to unsettle you. What did it mean to find out that you had this close relative so late in life?
It was actually quite wonderful. I mean, initially it was quite a shock, but David and I had actually been very close as children. We really connected. We got along very well. We played together, and so then to find out that if I could have had any brother, it was wonderful that it was David. And of course, along with that came his wife and his children, and yeah, it's pretty great.
More family.
More family.
Real family. You made the most of the time. You counted the days. It's about 10 months you and David and his family had together before he died of cancer.
Yes.
April 3rd, 2014.
Almost 5 years.
It's very sweet to read about.
And that was pretty devastating for me. You know, to lose him after such a short period of time, and yet being so blessed that God gave us that 10 months together, and that we really did reconnect during that period of time.
Well, clearly the enemy wasn't finished. targeting you, and trying to bring you down. You had a new lie that just seemed to come over you like a cloud. No one celebrated my birth.
Yes.
This came with the Ancestry.com revelation. Just the mix-up in where you belonged and whose you were, that became a very major cloud for you.
Absolutely. David and I had proven our reconnection as siblings because of DNA testing. But then afterwards, when I was anticipating the birth of our 6th grandchild, that thought did come. You know, nobody celebrated when I was born, so...
And then you were given away.
And then I was easily discarded. But you know, I have to tell you that God just swooped in and He did what He does best. You know, the Bible says that God is love. And because He is love, it's the essence and nature of His character. He can't help but love us. And so He gave me one verse that I'd like to share today. 1 John 3, verse 1. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are, and that is what I am. And so it almost felt a little bit like all of these other things that were important, knowing who my biological parents were is important, but knowing who my real Father is, that's what's the most important.
Psalm 139 is the framework for the entire book. It's throughout the book. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And I'm sure the Lord led you to discover the meaning of your name. It's actually Darlene Phyllis. And I just love this. I love people who give thought to a person's name and don't just make up something wacky. Darlene means darling or loved one. And Phyllis, to love. You were made to love. And today you own that, Darlene.
Absolutely.
You walk in that.
Absolutely. I'm loved one to love and like to believe that not just myself, but everybody, really God loves them. And that this is really just one story of how God can restore a person's life. I think we all have our stories.
I have to have you comment on this. A month before your father died, you forgave him. That was huge. How important has forgiveness been in your journey of wholeness?
Choosing to forgive means I can walk in freedom. It means that I allow God to be judge. It means that I put all of the anger and the hatred and the bitterness that I have inside of me in God's hands so that I can move forward.
Thank you for being obedient. God told you to do this, to write it out, at a point when you were drowning in the accumulated rubble of your life. The Lord wants to set us free. The loss of a parent often stirs up those old wounds, and you may be in that place, drowning. Don't stay there. Begin the journey. Let us help you. Our prayer lines are available. We have people who care. They've done the work themselves. They know the freedom that Darlene's talking about, and they want to help you to get there too. And I'll tell you, Darlene will walk with you. Amazing Grace, Abounding Love is a journey that might just be the help you need right now. Thank you so much for joining us. Darlene, thanks for coming from all the tomatoes down there are going to be soon. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back.